Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everybody. I have the pleasure to introduce Saharsh Agarwal to our TSC seminar. He's going to talk to us about the impact of Google AI overviews on publisher traffic and user experience. Saharsh, you have 40 minutes. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Chiara. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for the organizers for having me here. It's a great honor for me to be presenting my work. It's a paper I'm really excited about. It's a field experiment talking about the impact of AI overviews on publisher traffic and user experience. And this is joint work with Ananya Sen from Carnegie Mellon. So we'll just get started, and if you have clarifying questions, maybe just feel free to ask along the way, but for more substantial questions, we can just wait for the end. So firstly, a project of this nature requires tons of funding and support, so I'm very grateful to ISP for funding this project through a couple of different channels, and also to my RA Rohit, who's been phenomenal support throughout this project. So now the topic of this study is Google's AI overviews. To this audience, I don't really need to introduce what AI overviews are, but again, just for the sake of completeness, so like when you put a query on Google, uh, you start, Google is now showing you like an AI summary, which in most cases tends to answer the question that you're asking. And so you see a response, you see a bunch of different links, and these AI overviews have been a little controversial because if you think about the nature of the search market, it is very symbiotic. Like Google is not really producing content, and there are tons of content providers who exist, uh, and like whose existence depends on discovery on Google search. And so the relationship is very symbiotic because Google provides visibility to these content producers. And so therefore, when users use Google, Google makes money out of ad revenue. And these publishers also get traffic from Google. So therefore, it's a very symbiotic sort of a relationship. However, there has been a shift in this relationship in the last few years. And so there are increasing concerns around value capture in the search market, where although producers are taking effort and incurring the cost to produce content, the concern is that search engines might be internalizing the benefit of the content production, and they're sort of externalizing the cost onto the producers. So we are seeing a bit of an increase in the phenomena of zero-click searches, which is that a user makes a search, and instead of referring the user to the downstream content producer, search engines are answering those questions on the page itself, because of which I don't really need to click. And so that's the question, that's the tension here, and clearly there is an antitrust angle involved because of the value capture concern. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot that's been written about it, a lot of observational studies trying to look at, okay, the world before AI overviews, world without AI overviews, queries where AI overviews are shown versus queries where AI overviews are not shown. However, we don't really have clear causal relationship yet, and that's what we're trying to answer. And of course, this issue is at the core of a lot of antitrust concerns. Very recently, the European Commission launched an antitrust investigation against Google for the very same reason that we're talking about. And so this is the kind of policy discussion that we hope to contribute to through this work. And so in this paper, we are providing empirical evidence on this question using a randomized field experiment. And so we developed a custom Chrome browser, and so this browser was built on top of WebMonk by Chiara and Ray, and so it's an open source tool that they made available. So really thankful for that. And so what the extension does is two things mainly. So the extension allows us to log passive tracking data at great granularity. And so we can track every single URL visited, we can track every single click made, we can track every single scroll. And in fact, we can track a lot of detailed telemetry data like tab switches, pressing the back button, closing the browser window, and all of that. And so the level of granularity that at which we're able to track these users is very phenomenal. And beyond just tracking users, we can also passively manipulate the interface of any website that we like. And so what we did was, I'll come back to the study flow in a bit, but So we had the control interface where we just collected data without really changing anything. And 36% of our users were assigned to the control group. And then we had the main treatment intervention, the second one, which is the hide AI overview group. I'll call it HAIO in short. And so what we did here was that the AI overviews were hidden and everything else was pushed up in order to make the interface very seamless. And the third condition was it was an exploratory condition, the AI mode condition. And how it worked was that when users entered any query, even on the search bar, the browser address bar, or even if they go to google.com and if they type any query, they would be automatically redirected to AI mode and they could not have come out of it. And as you could expect, like we forced people to use AI mode and they could not have come out of it. And so we expected a lot of attrition in this arm. And anticipating that, we kept a small share of the split to AI mode because we wanted the results from this arm to be fairly exploratory. So these are the three different.
Saharsh,
Yes, Kiara.
sorry, quick clarifying question. When you say that you
Yeah.
can't get out of AI mode, does it mean that if they click on all images, etc., that does not redirect them to the other format?
Yeah. So actually, the example I'm showing you is not a great example because for the study participants, all of these were actually hidden, like all images, video, etc., in the AI mode. So they could not
I
have actually
see.
seen it.
For all of them, for all of
No,
the
in the
treatment
in no no
groups.
no in the AI mode,
I see. Okay,
right? So we didn't
thanks.
really want them to come out of the AI mode, but however, in the other two groups, they could see the other buttons. Yeah, these screenshots are sort of taken post facto. Uh, so now in terms of the study flow, so we use Prolific to recruit people who would be willing to install an extension. And so we first had a pre-screening survey, and in the pre-screening survey, we asked people three questions. The first was we asked them what the default search engine is on the system that they're using. If they responded anything other than Google, they were screened out. Secondly, we asked them what browser do they use on the current system. If they said anything other than Chrome, and even if they said like two different browsers, which was Chrome and Firefox, they were screened out. So they had to use Chrome and only Chrome. So we were trying to minimize users switching to a different browser. And thirdly, we asked them what all do they use their current desktop for. And if people said that they use it only for like taking surveys, because anecdotally we've seen that a lot of these prolific workers, they have a dedicated laptop just for taking surveys. And so we wanted to screen out those kind of people because they wouldn't be giving us any useful search data. And of course, this is all self-reported, but they didn't know what the expected answer was. So we can just trust that they're not really trying to please us with their answers. And so if they passed that check, then they were directed to a page where they could install the extension. And so we had given a passcode on the Prolific page which they could use to install the extension. And after that, of course, this baseline should have come before the extension installation. So we had a very brief baseline survey. Two questions we asked them. The first question was about their trust in AI generated information coming from these AI summaries. Secondly, we asked them about comfort with using AI tools for information seeking. That's it. And these are mainly for just checking heterogeneity. So after that, the extension automatically performed a history check. The reason we did this was that we only wanted to keep people who would give us reasonable search data in the period. And so there were a couple of things we checked for, like they should have reasonable amount of uh, browsing activity in the last 20 days. So like at least 10 days, we have some browsing data from them. And we have at least 10 Google searches for them in the last 20 days. And also we have at least 25 unique domains. These are very small numbers just to make sure that we don't have people who don't really use their laptop for search. And so if they pass that, the extension uh, sort of live and automatically randomizes them into one of the three groups, the hide group, which I just showed you, the control group, and the AI mode group. So the split. Now this is we are randomizing one at a time. Like we didn't really have the luxury to wait for all the participants to enroll and then and we had to randomize in real time and just sort of hope that the balance checks check out. And fortunately it did. I'll show you that. And so once people installed the extension, we observed them for 2 weeks. So that's what we promised. But participants were told that after 2 weeks, they can uninstall the extension. And so at the end of 2 weeks, their bonus was paid to them. And after the bonus was paid to them, an Endline survey was administered. And this part was important. So we paid the bonus first so that they could respond truthfully in the Endline survey. And yeah, of course, people were told that in the event that they do not choose to install after 2 weeks, we would still be possible to track some of the data. So, so yeah, we ended up recruiting 1065 people, and we checked for balance across basic demographics and trust in AI information. This is the baseline that we got in the survey: trust and comfort with AI tools. And the last three measures: prior Google visits, prior active browsing days, and prior unique domains. This we got from the extension itself when we were doing their browser history check. So we have balance between all the three groups. So of course this is balance at baseline, right? And now balance at baseline is great, but however, because it's a longitudinal study, we obviously expect some kind of attrition along the 2 weeks. And so while balance at baseline is good, we want to make sure that we don't have differential attrition across the 2 week period. And so the first thing that we actually tracked is participant
Saharsh,
survival.
sorry,
Yes, go
clarifying
ahead.
question.
Yeah.
Where are these people from? I should probably know
These are
from the
all
latitude and longitude,
these
but
are
I
all
don't.
US. Yeah, these are all US.
US.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
yeah. Okay, so yeah, we have balance at baseline, which is great. So the next thing to look at is survival over time, and do we have differential attrition? Now, our intervention was intended to be very light touch. Like all that we removed was the AI overviews, and basically nothing else changed. And if it was truly light, you would expect people not to really notice much, not to make a big fuss out of it, and not quit. And fortunately, that's what we see. And so, the 15th day is when the bonuses were actually paid, and the 2 week period was completed. And we have actually pretty good retention if you look at the main treatment and the control groups. So we have over 90% retention in both of these groups. And the good thing is that although there is some attrition, we don't see differential attrition. The attrition is pretty much similar. However, AI mode is very different. Like it's not very hard to expect. Uh, we sort of forced people to use AI mode for the 2 weeks. They could not have come out of it. Like even for a very simple search, uh, they get redirected to AI mode. And so 60% is the retention that we saw in the AI mode. And this is something that we anticipated as well. So given the higher attrition in the AI mode, we'll treat results from AI mode as more exploratory. And our main results are going to be focusing on the show and the hide AI overview groups. And of course, once the 15-day period was over, we administered the, the payment, the Endline survey, and among the people who chose to remain, and we switched the treatment status. So treatment became control, and control became treatment. And so the reason we did that is that while it's great to have between user comparison, this switch lets us have within user comparison before and after the switch. And in fact, we can also use user fixed effects so that we can be totally sure about our results. So I'll talk about that as well. Okay, so we start by first documenting the prevalence of AI overviews. And given how much is being discussed about this topic, we realized that people felt that this itself was an important contribution, just knowing how much of AI overviews is actually out there. And so if you look, so we observe a total of 68,000 unique searches in our data over the 2 week period. On average, we see that AI overviews were triggered in about 41% of all queries. And the good thing is that this is balanced across the treatment and the control groups. So it's really not as if people in the control group are putting in more queries which are likely to return an AI overview. We don't really see that happening here. And so most of our analysis is going to be following this particular partitioning, which is that there are queries which triggers an AI overview, and that is based on some algorithm that Google uses. And then there are some queries which do not. And now if you think about our extension, it does basically nothing for these 60% of queries where the AI overviews are not triggered. So there's absolutely nothing that our extension does other than just track data. And so the only cell which is affected by the intervention is this. And so this is the cell where we actually expect to find effects. And we'll treat the AIOV not triggered group as a placebo. So that's, and of course, we'll just do a very simple comparison of means uh, because we have successful randomization and this data is going to be at the search level. And so we'll be clustering all the standard errors at the user level. So now talking about the main results. So I'll first be talking about results at the search level. So like conditional on a search happening, uh, how many clicks do we see per search? What is the likelihood of that search being a zero-click search? What is the number of sponsored clicks that we see? So all of that analysis is going to be conditional on a search happening. However, there has been some discussion that maybe AI overviews is leading people to search a lot more. And so if that is the case, you might expect a shift in the extensive margin itself. And so after showing you results at the search level, I'll come back and show you results at the overall user level. So at the search level, so this data is at the search level. The first variable I'm tracking is the total number of external clicks per search. And so what we see is that in the control group, we see 0.37 clicks per search. By the way, these are organic clicks. I'm not sponsored clicks is on the third panel. And these are organic clicks basically coming from anywhere on the page. Okay, so they could be coming from the AIO view, they could be coming from the knowledge graph elements, they could be coming from the search links, but anywhere on the search page. And so we see that when we hide the AIO views, the clicks per search goes up by a really large number, which is 0.25. And so if I keep the hide group as the base, like the status quo before AIO views were launched, so the reduction in clicks as a result of AIO views is about 40%. And similarly, uh, the probability of a zero-click search in the presence of AI overviews is 0.73. So what that basically means is that if people put in 100 searches, uh, and then when an AI overview is triggered, 73 of those searches do not lead to any click. But when you hide the AI overviews, that number drops from 73 to 54. And when it comes to sponsored clicks, we don't really see an effect. Of course, these numbers are really very small. So if an effect at all exists, like it would require significantly more power to detect it. But at least with the power that we had, we don't see any effect on sponsored clicks. These are only conditioning on queries where the AI OVs are triggered. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this half where the AI OVs are not triggered, and we shouldn't really see any difference in the treatment and the control groups. And that's what we see. So when we condition on queries where the AI OVs are not triggered, for external clicks, we don't see any difference. For likelihood of a zero-click search, again, we do not see any difference. And same for sponsored clicks. Although one thing to notice here is that the number of sponsored clicks here are almost 3 times the number of sponsored clicks here, although we don't see any difference. And so it sort of suggests that Google might be strategically choosing to deploy AI overviews in some kind of queries and not the others. But we don't really see effects here, and this is reassuring because if our placebo, I mean, if our extension is sort of working as it should, we don't really expect to see effects in this particular arm. So these are all results from the search level, and these are all between user comparison. I've compared the treatment and the hide group. Sorry, the treatment group and the control group. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you results from the within user comparison. So once the 2-week period was over, we flipped the treatment status for the treatment and the control users. So those who had AI overviews hidden became control, and those who had AI overviews being shown became the hide group. And now we compare these users pre and post switch. So the panel on top are those users who were initially in the hide group, and the row in the bottom are those people who were initially in the control group. So if you look at those who were initially in the hide group, before the switch, they had higher clicks, and after the switch, this went down, and we see a nearly symmetric switch for people in the control group, and same for zero click search. So now this is purely a within user comparison, and we have user fixed effects here. That's why these difference numbers are not really aligned with the arithmetic difference of the difference in the bars, because we have user fixed effects when computing the differences. And so now what this is telling me is that even if for whatever reason our treatment and control groups were not very comparable, at least if we look at the same user across different conditions, we see exactly the same effects. And this is very reassuring that the results that we are finding are very causal. Okay, so this is what I have for search level results. The next concern, of course, is that uh, this entire analysis is conditional on search, but what if AI overviews is leading people to search more, for instance? And so it's possible that clicks per search are going down, but if searches are really increasing a lot more, then it's not clear what the effect on total clicks will be. So that's what we're looking at here. So now this data is at the user day level. We also have user level regressions which have very similar results. So this data is at the user day level, and we are looking at three different variables. The first is total number of searches made by a user day. Second is total number of clicks coming from AI overview triggered queries. Third is clicks coming from AI overview not triggered queries. And here we see that there is no effect on number of searches. So across the treatment and the control groups, we don't see people making less searches because we've hidden the AI overviews. And at the user day level, we see an increase of clicks by a significant proportion relative to the control, relative to the baseline. And we don't see effects for queries where the AI overviews are not triggered. So, so basically, it's not as if people are searching a lot more, at least in the 2 week period. In the longer term, things may be a little different, but in the 2 week period, people not searching any less or more just because we hit the AI overviews. So now one narrative which has been going on is that okay, like AI overviews are cutting clicks, but these are all low value clicks that the AI overviews are cutting, because there are people who land on your page and then okay, who realize that okay, this is not what I was looking for, and who quit very early. And so we can examine this in the data. So there are three different metrics that we look at in terms of the quality of the click. So now this observation is at the click level. We observe a set of searches from the main treatment group. We observe a set of searches from the control group, and we are comparing these clicks on three different metrics. The first thing that we're looking at for the click is the likelihood that after the click, the user pressed the back button to go back to Google search. Now, if you notice, like we have slightly lesser observations for this one compared to these two. That's because, so if you think about a user using Google search, they can either make a left click or they can make a right click and open a link in a new tab. We are able to track all of that with our extension. Now, if you open a link in the same tab, you can press the back button and go back to Google search. But if you open it in a new tab, there is no back button there. And so we are tracking the back button search only for same tab clicks, which is why we have slightly lesser observations. We see that, and this number was significantly more than we had anticipated. 40% of all clicks coming from Google, they lead to the user going back to Google, potentially indicating an unresolved search. And so, but this number is not different at all in the treatment and the control groups. The second measure that we're tracking is bounce. Now, bounce is a measure which has no standard definition. Like many different people track many different definitions of bounce. So what we did is we first computed the total time that people spent on the click page. And of course, the caveat here is that time spent on a page is a very noisy measure to capture. Like despite the best of telemetry data, like there are always approximations involved in computing time spent. However, when we're looking at short durations, it's much more accurate. When you're looking at longer durations, it's not clear as if someone was really looking at the screen, or if they were somewhere away. So we define bounce as a click session which lasts less than 10 seconds and where the user did not make any navigation inside the click page. So both of these conditions have to be true. Uh, I may have I may have left that website within, let's say, 8 seconds, but if I made a click anywhere inside that page, then that is not counted as a bounce. So bounce is uh, duration less than 10 seconds and not engaging with the page that you've clicked on. And again, we see that about 18% of all clicks were low quality bounce clicks where the user bounced out without doing much in less than 10 seconds. However, this is not different in the treatment and the control groups. And then we also looked at overall duration, and that is also not different. And so this is not very consistent with the current narrative that AI overviews primarily eliminate low quality clicks. We don't really see any difference here. So this is in terms of the quality of clicks. And then I told you that we had a third arm, which was the AI mode arm. And as again, just reminding you that given the differential attrition, we won't make a strongly causal claim about this arm. However, uh, it's just a nice add-on to have. And so we don't have a split here of queries where AI OVs were triggered and where they were not triggered because we don't have an equivalent of that in the AI mode. And so we are looking at all the queries in the control group together without the AI overview trigger not trigger split. Similarly, we're looking at all the queries in the treatment group, and then we're looking at all the queries in the AI mode group. Now, defining a query in the AI mode is a lot more complicated because it's conversational. So like someone puts in a query and then they could be putting a follow-up query. Now the follow-up query could just be a refinement, could be a follow-up question, it could be a fundamentally different query. And so we're taking a very simple approach, which is that we're taking the first query, which starts the conversation as a query in the AI mode. And then any follow-up question which happens to that question. So any click happens anywhere, all of them gets attributed to the first query. Okay, and so we'll be overstating clicks per search because it's right now what we're saying is that if someone puts in a query on Google AI mode, and then it's possible that after two follow-ups they put a third query which is fundamentally different. And now in the entire session, let's say that they make only two clicks. And so we'll be saying that they made two clicks for the original query which started the session. However, it's actually two clicks for two different queries. So, but we are collapsing it all into one query. So it's a simplification which is sort of overstating the clicks per search. But we see that uh, the number of clicks in the AI mode was actually lower than even the number of clicks in the control group, which was anyways lower than the height group. And correspondingly, the probability of a zero click search was much higher in the AI mode group compared to the control and the height. And so yeah, this is very indicative. Like as search goes more and more towards conversational AI, there is a concern about okay, how is the future going to look like in terms of publisher traffic, etc. And we hope that this serves as very indicative evidence of where we might be headed. So now I'm going to show you some results on heterogeneity. So the first aspect of heterogeneity which we looked at is the position of the AI overview. Now chooses a Google makes multiple choices. The first is whether to show an AI overview or not. The second choice that Google makes is where to show it, right? So I'm sure you might have some experience of it. Most of the times the AI overview appears right at the top of the page, which I'm calling position 0. So about 88% of all queries on which AI overviews are shown, AI overview is like the first thing that you see on the page. And then of course I'm defining these different relative positions. So imagine that you have an AI overview at the top, and then you have three search results below that. So the AI overview would have a position 0, and then the other search results would have position 1, 2, and 3. There are times when the AI overview appears below search results, like embedded between two different search results. So that's captured by these different relative positions. But it's a very skewed split. Most of the times AI overviews appear right at the top. And given the skew here, we are basically defining two splits. One is that all queries for which AI overviews appear at the top versus queries where they appear not at the top. And these are results for external clicks. So we see that pretty much our entire result is driven by clicks where AI overviews appear right at the top. And for queries where AI overviews do not appear at the top, we see no effects. Now, of course, this should not be treated as a causal effect of position because position here is not randomized. So queries which appear in position 0 might be very different from those appearing in a lower position. However, this is very indicative, and I would say that this is even uh, this suggests that we need more work into understanding what is it about AI overviews that is really leading to such strong effects. Is it really that they give information that people value, or is it just that they are occupying prime real estate and uh, and they're sort of cannibalizing the organic links as a result? So I think that's something which should be looked at in future research. We also look at effects by query type. So we classify the queries that users put in into three different types. This very standard classification, like for those who work on Google search data: informational, navigational, and transactional. Informational queries are those where people are looking for some kind of information online. Navigational is where they're looking to navigate to a particular website. Like for instance, someone just puts a search for YouTube. So it's very clear that they're just trying to navigate to YouTube. And the third is transactional, where they're looking to either make a purchase or to like download a software. So where they're actually looking to like complete an action. So that's what transactional is about. And so we see that informational queries are the overwhelming number in our data. 71% of all searches are informational, followed by navigational at 18% and transactional at 12. And yeah, so Google is basically strategically showing AI overviews where it thinks it's more valuable. And so AI overviews appear 53% of the times in informational queries, 6% in navigational, which is reasonable. Like when I know where I want to go, an AI overview is not very useful potentially. And transactional is 15%. Just a short note, like in the paper, in the draft which was shared, these two numbers were sort of flipped. There was a typo. Navigational was mentioned as 15 and transactional is 6. So just take note of that. So yeah, these are effects by query type. And yeah, of course, what we see is that most of the effects come from informational queries. Although I would say that it's hard to rule out it's hard to rule out effects in navigational and transactional queries because we don't have enough power. As I said, only 6 and 15% of all queries actually return AI overviews. The direction is there, we just don't have enough power to detect effects. So next, we also look at effects by topic. So query type these are like very, very broad classifications. We look at topic, which is like more granular. So I have plotted two things in this chart. So of course, many different topics that the queries have been classified into. So the length of the bars shows the prevalence of AI overviews for that particular group, and the shade of the bars shows the distribution, the share of all searches in the data which belongs to that particular topic. So for instance, we see that arts and entertainment had the highest share of searches in the data, but the highest prevalence of AI overviews was for health and science. So health, science, law, government, like these are more informational focused topics which see significantly higher prevalence of AI overviews. And news, shopping, sports, like events, topics which tend to be more current, more live. I guess these have lower prevalence of AI overviews. So we also try to look at effects across all of these. So we see significant effects in all the topics, but given that we are splitting the data a lot, it's hard to compare across the different categories. So we see effects in all of them, like AI overviews are basically reducing clicks in every single one of these. However, it's really hard to compare one topic with the other because we don't have enough power to do that. And so next, after the 2 week period, we delivered a bonus payment to the users, and then we invited them for an Endline survey, and we had 90% response rate to the Endline survey, which was great. Now in the Endline sample, I'm only restricting this to people who had actually kept the extension installed for the 2 week period. If they had quit in between, they're not part of the Endline survey because we want to make sure that we are only measuring people who actually took part in the study properly. And so three things that we tracked. We asked them how was their overall search experience over the last 2 weeks. And by the way, till now, people have no idea that this study is about Google search. They just think it's a general web browsing kind of study. We asked them to rate the quality of information that they found on Google, and we asked them uh, to rate the ease of finding information on Google in the last 2 weeks. And the headline result here is that at least with the obvious limitations of a self-reported measure, we don't see any effect at all in the three measures between the main treatment and the control groups. Although we hid AIO views for 2 weeks, most people did not reduce the number of searches. They did not think that the search experience was affected. They didn't feel that the quality of information was affected. They didn't think that information became harder to find. And in fact, most people didn't even notice what we had done. And so that says something uh, about how much users might be valuing the AIO views. And so we see a bit of a wedge here that in terms of user experience, I mean, I'm sure that there is an entire distribution, and so there are people who would really value the AI overviews. However, when you look at the average, at least on the user experience side, AI overviews don't seem to be doing much. However, on the publisher side, the cost is really high. And so that's something to think about, which is that all the lost clicks they don't seem to be improving the search experience. And so it's coming at a pretty significant cost. So to summarize, uh, we are showing uh, we are showing some very solid causal evidence on a topic which is very policy relevant. We are saying that AI overviews are having a significant impact for publishers, and wherever they appear, AI overviews on average reduce clicks by 40%. And by the way, these numbers are expected to rise because what we are showing is clicks per search, and so you can expect that with time the prevalence of AI OVs will increase, and that has been the trend. Like when we ran the study, we saw a prevalence of 40%. When we were doing some pilots, which was in November of 2025, the prevalence of AI OVs was around 20-25%. And so just in that 3 month period, the prevalence went up from 25 to 40. And so as that prevalence goes up, the downstream impact is going to be proportionally more. And we find that the effect was primarily driven by position zero prominence. And so this suggests that there is some work required to understand like what is it about AI overviews which is leading to these effects. Are users really liking the summary, finding it valuable, or is it just that they're occupying prime real estate? And that's what is leading to all the results. And yeah, users are surprisingly indifferent to the presence or absence of AI overviews. But yeah, users are extremely resistant to AI mode as a default. So we also felt this was an interesting result because there's a lot of conversation about how it might be the end of Google as we know it with the rise of ChatGPT, etc. However, it seems that uh, as a default, people are resistant to a fully conversational AI interface, and so the standard Google as we know it is probably here to stay for some time at least. So that's all that I had. I'm happy to take questions and hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Saharsh. Now, Dante, you have 5 minutes to help us start the reflections. And for the others, if you have questions that you don't want to ask directly, you can put them in the chat and I will ask them.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Dante Donati. I'm at Columbia Business School. Thanks for inviting me to discuss this paper. Congratulations to the authors. I think this is an important and very well executed paper, an important question. The design is very clever. So it was nice to read and learn a lot. So now my job is to push on I think the interpretation of some results and also high-level open questions. And I want to do that through the lenses of the main stakeholders in this market. So the first is the search engine and the consumers, and then also the publishers and the brands. So first, let's take the perspective of the search engine as well as the consumers together. So one of the last results that was shown, and is also the headlines of the paper, is that the overviews divert traffic without much improvement into the user experience. So this is actually my only pushback a little bit. So I want to gently push back on the second part of this claim. So the conclusion about the user experience not going up or not moving rests on this stated preference survey, and it's based on this satisfaction score, right? But I think actually, if we look at what people do, they click less, right? They accept zero-click answers. So if we think about this in terms of reveal preference, then this might actually imply lower search costs. And so people find what they need without paying the click and scroll tax. So the behavior, I think, it's consistent with the utility going up, even if satisfaction scores stay flat. Okay, so it's a different interpretation, which I think is important. So I would be careful concluding there is no benefit to users from that survey-based results. And if we think about online retail platforms in general, reductions in clicks per search normally reflect improvements in search efficiency. And so that logic can apply in your context too, right? So perhaps you can look at the time to find the answer metrics or task completion time metrics or measures. And I think those would speak directly to consumer welfare more than the survey. So if we look at the consumer side only, I think there the deeper welfare question isn't just how many links they click, but actually what I end up consuming, okay? So given that in your context, most searches are informational, the question I think is, do consumers read different information from different sources with different length or authority compared to the pre-AI world? Sorry. So I think perhaps you can look at what is cited in the overview and compare the sources cited there against the top ranked results, organic results, right? For example, I would be curious to see whether more word of mouth sources are cited there versus established news outlets. And I think you have the data to answer these questions and you can do that. So now let's switch to the publisher side. I think for publishers, that's where the results are the strongest, very convincing. What I would do, I would frame the paper more explicitly around the type of good that is consumed here. So in the footnote, you have that informational queries account for 71% of searches, and that's where most of overview trigger rates is the highest. So I think the results speak directly to publishers. So these results speak to them. So this is about news, content, information consumption, right? So I would make that footnote much more salient in the paper, more prominent, rather than just keeping in a footnote. So the other question then on publishers is about the overview itself as a channel, right? So the question there connects to my previous comment. So are the sources cited in the overview the same as those cited in top rank organic results, or are they something else? Where basically overview borrow from, right? This is critical, right? Do users click and the links in the overview that are provided there? Actually, it wasn't clear to me if the outbound clicks also include the links that are provided by the overview. And if being cited in an overview recovers some of the traffic that instead would go to the organic results, then you can reframe the story from a pure cannibalization toward a GEO gain, right? Generative engine optimization perspective. And I think this is actually an important question, a deep question in digital marketing, right? So this opens a chance to understand whether GEO efforts for brands and for publishers pay off, right? So where basically the overview side from, right? Does it borrow from the organic results or not? And then finally, I have the brand side, and then I'm done. So the brands, the commercial transactional side. So you have a clean null sponsor clicks result, which is interesting, but I think that's kind of partly might be mechanical, and I think you can elaborate on that. So the overviews, in fact, in that side are less common for transactional queries. You said it, 50% trigger rate out of 12% of searches that are transactional. So I think for those searches where the sponsor link matter, the overview mostly isn't there, right? It's not there much often. So what I would do, I would make an argument explicitly rather than just presenting the null result, and I would try to justify that null conclusion more carefully. And also for brands, and this is my last point, for brands and consumers, I think the first order question in this area is whether this new search environment affects discovery and choice, okay? So what products consumers buy, what prices they pay, what attributes they look for. So this is an open question, right? And I'm not sure that you should answer this question in this paper, but maybe you have the data. So if you can say anything about, for example, studying the prompts consumer write in the AI mode more explicitly, trying to understand the discovery phase for products, for brands, I think that would be really valuable in this domain, okay? So to sum up, I think this is a great paper. Do you have credible causal inference and causal evidence? The implications for traffic are very important. So suggestions are mainly soften the interpretation of some of your results and maybe exploit the data to answer questions on the information and also on the discovery phase using the prompts that you have, the prompts that you have. And thanks a lot for inviting me.